Alex stood at the threshold of his new home, a dilapidated Victorian house that loomed against the backdrop of a gray sky. Its weathered facade, draped in vines and shadows, echoed his desire for solitude. He had traded the bustling streets of the city for these quiet hills, hoping that the isolation would rekindle his artistic spirit, which had waned under the weight of expectation and noise. As he stepped inside, the floorboards creaked beneath his weight, announcing his presence to the empty rooms that smelled of dust and history. Sunlight filtered through grimy windows, casting slanted beams that danced across the surfaces like specters. Alex felt an unsettling mix of excitement and trepidation, as if the house itself was alive, watching him with its many hidden corners. He took a deep breath, inhaling the musty air that filled his lungs, a stark contrast to the sterile environment of his former life. He wandered through the dimly lit hallways, tracing his fingers along the faded wallpaper, imagining the lives that had once filled the space with laughter and joy. Rooms lay in disarray, remnants of the past scattered about. An old rocking chair in the corner, a broken mirror reflecting fragments of a forgotten existence. Each item seemed to whisper stories long abandoned, inviting Alex to listen closely. In the heart of the house lay his studio, a sunken room with slanted ceilings that housed an assortment of canvases and brushes he had brought along. This would be where he poured out his thoughts and emotions, where he sought to capture fleeting moments of beauty on canvas. He set up his easel facing a window that overlooked a sprawling meadow, where wildflowers swayed gently in the breeze. As he began to paint, however, he found himself increasingly distracted by the shadows that flickered at the edges of his vision. They moved like wisps of smoke whenever he turned away, and for a moment, he questioned if it was merely a trick of the light or something more sinister. This unsettling sensation brushed against his mind like a cold draft. Perhaps these shadows were manifestations of his own fears and insecurities, remnants of a past he couldn't escape. Yet he couldn't help but feel drawn to them, sensing they might hold the key to unlocking deeper layers of inspiration within him. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Alex felt an unshakable unease settle over the house. The dim lighting transformed the once familiar rooms into enigmatic spaces filled with lurking possibilities. The air thickened with a tension he couldn't quite articulate, as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for something to unfold. Nights in the house were particularly unsettling. The long silence stretched like a taut string, broken only by the sporadic creaking of floorboards and the wind howling through gaps in the ancient structure. Whispers seemed to echo softly in the shadows, indistinguishable murmurs that sent chills down his spine. At first, he convinced himself it was merely the old house settling, but deep down, a flicker of dread ignited each time he heard a noise, a distant thud, a faint rustle, as if unseen occupants were moving about. One evening, as he sharpened his pencils and prepared to sketch, a sudden chill swept through the studio. His breath caught in his throat as he glanced toward the window. Outside, beyond the veil of gathering darkness, the trees swayed gently, their branches clawing at the night sky. But it was inside that felt most alive. Shadows danced along the walls with an unsettling grace that made him question their origins. Were they mere figments of his imagination, or something more sentient? As days slipped into weeks, Alex couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. He often caught glimpses of movement from the corner of his eye, a fleeting shadow darting past or standing just outside the periphery of his vision. In moments of solitude, he would feel an unfamiliar weight pressing on his chest, as if invisible eyes scrutinized his every action. This sensation gnawed at him during quiet moments when he worked late into the evening, pushing him to confront what lay hidden within the house. The painting process itself became entwined with this eerie atmosphere. Inspiration mingled with trepidation as he wielded his brush against canvas under flickering light. A part of him yearned to capture this ethereal quality in his work, the disquieting energy that permeated his surroundings, while another part was gripped by a primal fear of what might truly be present within those dimly lit rooms. As the days turned into nights, Alex became consumed by his artwork, retreating deeper into the confines of his studio. The canvas called to him with an urgency he hadn't felt in years, pushing him to fill the void left by the muted vibrancy of his former life. Time lost its meaning as he became engrossed in brush strokes and colors, often neglecting meals and sleep. The shadows, once a source of discomfort, now became his muses, flickering shapes that inspired him in ways he couldn't quite comprehend. With each painting session, Alex found himself experimenting with darker hues and swirling forms that mirrored the shadows he perceived around him. He felt strangely connected to these elusive figures, as if they understood his struggles and desires. The air thickened with creative energy. Each stroke of his brush seemed to breathe new life into the canvases, yet it also intensified his obsession with deciphering their meaning. Were the shadows mere reflections of his psyche, or did they hold something more profound, a narrative waiting to be unveiled? As night enveloped the house, the studio transformed into a surreal realm. Flickering candlelight created a dance of movement across the walls, and the shadows twisted in intricate patterns that captivated his imagination. When he paused to observe them, it was as if they were reaching out to him, stretching and bending in response to his emotions. Alex became engrossed in their behavior, studying how they shifted with every subtle change in light. Some seemed playful, while others appeared ominous, a silent conversation filled with unspoken words. His fixation on these shadows seeped into his everyday life. Conversations with friends faded as he withdrew further into solitude, choosing instead to engage with the flickering darkness that surrounded him. His peers noticed the change and voiced concern, but Alex dismissed their worries. They didn't understand the unique connection he felt. The shadows were revealing something deeper about himself, an exploration of fears long buried and dreams yet realized. Yet as months passed, he began to wonder if this obsession was a blessing or a curse. With each completion of a piece inspired by these ethereal figures, he felt a duality within him: exhilaration at uncovering new depths of creativity and an unsettling dread that perhaps something darker was at play, an uninvited presence entwined within his art. As Alex continued to immerse himself in his artistry, strange occurrences began to unfold within the confines of his studio. At first, they were subtle: a paintbrush inexplicably rolling off a table or a canvas shifting slightly from its place when he wasn't looking. He dismissed these incidents as mere accidents, the byproducts of an overactive imagination fueled by late nights and fatigue. However, the incidents soon escalated into something more unsettling. One evening, while lost in thought and layering deep shades onto a canvas, he noticed the easel had been pushed back several feet from where he had left it. Confusion washed over him. He was certain he hadn't moved it. A chill ran down his spine as he glanced around, half expecting to find someone or something lurking in the shadows. The flickering candlelight cast elongated silhouettes across the walls, creating an illusion of movement that sent his heart racing. As days progressed, shadowy figures began to flit just beyond the edges of his vision, quick glimpses of dark shapes that vanished when he turned his head. These fleeting shadows danced playfully at first but gradually morphed into more defined forms that felt almost sentient. Their presence became increasingly impossible to ignore. They seemed to have their own rhythm and purpose, drawing him into a world where reality and imagination blurred. One night, as he painted with frenzied passion, he heard a soft rustling behind him. He spun around only to find one of his sketches had been turned upside down on the table. Anxiety twisted in his stomach as he approached it cautiously. Who or what could be responsible for this? The quiet solitude that once brought him comfort now felt suffocating and menacing. Sleep-deprived and unnerved, Alex started to question his sanity. Each time he convinced himself that what he saw could be explained away: a draft from an old window or a trick of the light, another peculiar event would occur to challenge that belief. He began documenting these occurrences in a journal, hoping that if they were real, understanding them might reveal something significant about himself and the house. Yet with each passing night filled with unexplained movements and shadowy figures creeping closer, Alex felt himself teetering on the brink of madness. The very thing that inspired him now haunted his waking hours, complicating not just his art but also his grasp on reality itself. In the solitude of the Victorian house, Alex found himself spiraling into a vortex of inner turmoil. The walls echoed with his thoughts, amplifying feelings of loneliness that settled deep within him like an unwelcome guest. As he sat at his easel, paintbrush poised, he couldn't escape the shadows that loomed not just in his studio but also in his mind. Memories surged forth, unbidden, fragments of past relationships marked by betrayal and disappointment. Reminders of a life once vibrant now reduced to fleeting echoes. He frequently replayed old conversations in his head, dissecting every word, every pause, as if searching for answers to questions he was too afraid to ask aloud. The isolation he had sought to embrace began to morph into a prison, each creak of the floorboards heightening his sense of paranoia. It felt as if the very house conspired with his insecurities, transforming them into tangible fears that danced mockingly around him. The shadows, which had initially inspired him creatively, now seemed to embody the manifestations of his anxiety. Were they reflections of his own fears, representations of abandonment and self-doubt? Each flicker and shimmer reminded him of moments when he felt unseen or unheard, stirring up an unsettling nostalgia that made it hard to differentiate between reality and imagination. In those quiet moments when he paused from painting, he felt their presence looming closer, as if they were there to witness his unraveling. Alex began to question whether he could trust his perception of reality. Were these specters simply figments born from the depths of his loneliness? At times he found himself yearning for human connection yet recoiling at the thought of vulnerability. Past rejections haunted him like phantoms. The thought of reaching out filled him with dread. What if they were met with silence again? His thoughts turned darker as paranoia seeped into every corner of his consciousness. What if there was something sinister about the shadows? What if they were not merely products of his imagination but rather entities feeding off his despair? He documented these odd sensations in his journal, hoping that confronting them through writing might illuminate some deeper truth. Yet as he poured himself onto the page, it felt less like therapy and more like a descent into madness. Each brushstroke became a battle between creation and destruction, a struggle against both external shadows and those lurking within him. Alex realized that understanding this turmoil was crucial if he ever hoped to reclaim not only control over his art but also over himself. With each passing day in isolation, it became clear. Facing these inner demons would be as formidable a task as confronting the shadows dancing just out of reach in the dim light of his studio. In the midst of his spiraling thoughts and escalating paranoia, a flicker of determination ignited in Alex. The shadows that had haunted him, once mere figures at the edge of his vision, now demanded confrontation. Armed with a camera, he made a bold decision to document any paranormal activity that might validate his experiences, or dispel them entirely. This was no longer just about capturing art. It was about capturing the unseen world that lurked within the walls of his home. He set up the camera in his studio, positioning it to catch every corner, every crevice where shadows might emerge. The anticipation tinged the air with electricity as he prepared for a night of observation. With a mix of excitement and dread churning in his stomach, he settled into a chair, letting the silence envelop him like a heavy blanket. The only sound was the soft hum of the camera as it recorded, an unblinking eye watching over him. Hours passed slowly, punctuated by the occasional creak of the house settling, a sound he had grown all too familiar with. Yet tonight felt different. There was an energy in the air, thick and charged. As darkness deepened, he noticed movement in the periphery of his vision. Flickers of darkness darting away as if aware they were being watched. Each time he turned to face them directly, they melted into nothingness. Then came the first clear sign. A shadowy figure distinctively shifted across the wall behind him, captured by the camera's lens even as it disappeared from his sight. Heart racing, Alex rewound the footage and stared in disbelief as he saw it again. A fleeting glimpse of something otherworldly that confirmed what he had suspected all along. The shadows were real. They were not simply figments of his troubled mind. Encouraged, Alex continued to film, becoming engrossed in this new pursuit. He felt a rush of exhilaration. Could he truly uncover their secrets? With renewed vigor, he began experimenting with different angles and lighting, hoping to coax more of these elusive figures into view. Each revelation brought him closer to understanding their existence and his own fears. However, as he documented these experiences night after night, an unsettling realization dawned on him. The more he sought to capture the shadows, the more they seemed to respond to his presence. It was as if they thrived on his fear and curiosity, a dance between creator and creation unfolding before him. As Alex pushed deeper into this exploration, he couldn't shake the feeling that confronting these shadows would lead him down a path fraught with danger, one that could either liberate him or plunge him further into madness. As the nights wore on, the shadows in Alex's studio grew bolder, seemingly emboldened by his burgeoning fascination. What had once been fleeting glimpses now morphed into more pronounced figures that danced defiantly across the walls, their movements synchronized with the ebb and flow of his emotions. A strange sense of terror intertwined with exhilaration ignited within him. He was both terrified and captivated by these shadowy beings that appeared to respond to his every thought and fear. One particularly chilling evening, wrapped in the silence of the house, Alex set up his camera once again, hoping to record something extraordinary. As he adjusted the focus, he felt a shiver ripple through the room. An electric energy pulsed around him. He could almost hear whispers carried on the wind, soft yet urgent, urging him to look closer. When he did, he witnessed a shadow extend across his easel as if reaching for him. His heart raced as he realized this was not merely an illusion. It was an acknowledgement of his presence. After capturing this moment on film, Alex leaned back in awe and trepidation. The shadows were transforming from mere figments of his imagination into entities that engaged with him directly. Each night brought new phenomena, colors swirling strangely on his canvas when no brush touched it, and laughter, an inaudible echo that reverberated through his mind as shadows flickered playfully. Yet, with each bold display came an unsettling reminder of their potential menace. During one recording session, he captured a dark figure emerging from behind a curtain, looming larger than life before it vanished into thin air. The sight left him shaken. What if these shadows were not just manifestations of creativity, but also harbingers of something darker? Moments later, a heavy thud resonated behind him, a sound so intense it rattled the very core of his being. As Alex delved deeper into his exploration, he became increasingly aware that the shadows thrived on his fear and curiosity. It was as if they fed off this duality, pushing him further towards madness while simultaneously drawing out his artistry. In their presence, moments of sheer terror blended seamlessly with bursts of awe-inspiring beauty, the interplay leaving him teetering at the brink between exhilaration and despair. With each passing night filled with supernatural encounters that thrilled and terrified him in equal measure, Alex grappled with whether these experiences represented a profound connection or a descent into chaos. He began to question if capturing them would ultimately expose truths about himself or pull him deeper into an abyss from which there would be no return. A haunting dance between artist and muse growing ever more intense under the watchful gaze of his shadowy companions. One fateful night, spurred by a mix of dread and courage, Alex decided it was time to confront the shadows directly. He set up his camera to record, but this time he wouldn't just observe, he would speak to them. As the air thickened with anticipation, he took a deep breath and stepped into the center of the studio, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows that intertwined with his own. "Who are you?" he called out, his voice trembling yet resolute. "What do you want from me?" For an instant, silence reigned, interrupted only by the soft rustle of the wind outside. The shadows momentarily stilled, almost seeming to consider his words. A chill swept through the room, as if the very essence of the house had paused to hear him. Then, slowly, they began to shift. The corners of the room swallowed the darkness, and with it, a figure began to take form. A shadow that coalesced at his feet before rising to face him. It flickered and pulsed like a heartbeat, gradually revealing shapes that bore a striking resemblance to people from his past. Faces etched in sorrow and familiarity that tugged at the edges of his memory. It was as if all his unresolved emotions manifested here, reminding him of friendships lost and love unfulfilled. Suddenly, realization hit him. These were not just shadows. They were the embodiments of his regrets and fears. Each figure represented a memory he had buried deep within himself, haunting manifestations of moments he had chosen to forget or ignore. Their presence stirred something within him. Alex felt the weight of their stories pressing down on him, the pain of loss mingling with nostalgia. As he faced this tapestry of memories, Alex's heart raced. He understood now that in order to heal and reclaim himself, he must acknowledge these figures. "I see you," he whispered, more to himself than the shadows. "I recognize my past." With each acknowledgement came a wave of emotion that surged through him, a strange release accompanied by bittersweet reflections. The shadows flickered with intensity as if responding to his admission, swirling around him in an almost celebratory manner. In that moment of connection, Alex felt layers of isolation begin to peel away. The very act of addressing his inner turmoil brought forth a profound clarity. He was no longer merely an artist trying to capture darkness. He was confronting it head-on. The shadows reformulated into ephemeral whispers and tears that danced in the flickering light. As they melded into one another, Alex realized that he held the power to transform this energy into art, a therapeutic release allowing him to pour these memories onto canvas. In their recognition, he found understanding. In their embrace, he discovered hope. This climactic encounter had not only illuminated his path forward, but also signaled the dawn of a new artistic journey shaped by truth and acceptance. As Alex stepped back from the emotional confrontation with the shadows, a profound sense of catharsis washed over him. No longer did he perceive them as mere phantoms. Rather, they emerged as guides through his tangled web of past traumas. The realization that he had relinquished his fear granted him an unparalleled freedom. Instead of fleeing from the shadows, he felt drawn to them, as though they were threads woven into the fabric of his existence, fragments of himself waiting to be acknowledged. With newfound clarity, Alex approached his easel, brushed in hand, ready to explore the depths of these revelations through his art. As he painted, each stroke transformed into a dialogue, a conversation with the shadows that lingered not only in the room but also within his heart. He painted not just the darkness around him but the weight that had hung over him for so long. Moments of heartbreak, regret, and sorrow came to life on the canvas. The colors swirled vibrantly under his brush, intermingling with hues of gray and black, representing the struggle between light and darkness within him. With each completed piece, he felt the shadows within him accepting his emotions, the yearning, the loss, the fear, allowing them to flow freely like a river breaking down barriers accumulated over years. It was exhilarating and sobering at once, an outpouring of unfiltered truth that left him breathless. In the intimate space of his studio, Alex found solitude transformed into sanctuary. The shadows flickered joyously around him, appearing as ethereal dancers embracing every brushstroke he applied against the canvas. He could see their forms taking shape, whispers of old memories materializing within the paint, urging him to remember both the pain and joy they represented. This acceptance marked a clear turning point in his journey as an artist, a redefining moment where he acknowledged that every shadow held a lesson. Healing was no longer about masking wounds but rather accepting them as inseparable parts of his story. Through this dynamic exploration of his own psyche, Alex recognized that by embracing his scars, he could find beauty where despair once lay. As days turned into weeks, he continued to paint these connections with greater intensity and reverberating confidence. The more he engaged with the figures from his past, the more he felt restored, each piece revealing not just lost memories but pathways to light. The acceptance of these inner demons allowed him to forge a deeper connection with himself and the legacy of his work. In this profound breakthrough, fear transformed to clarity. Alex was no longer merely surviving in his art but thriving, ready to embark on a new chapter filled with possibility. In the months that followed his emotional breakthrough, Alex transformed not only as an artist but as a person. The once reclusive figure who had stepped into the Victorian house seeking isolation now flourished within its walls, embracing the shadows that had once caused him such fear. No longer did he view them as haunting reminders of his anxieties. Instead, they became trusted companions in his creative journey, guiding him to explore layers of depth and emotion he had previously shied away from. His studio, infused with vibrant colors and swirling patterns, had become a sanctuary where pain was transformed into beauty. Each stroke of his brush narrated tales of loss and resilience, chronicling his internal battles in a way that resonated with authenticity. He poured his heart into a new series of artworks that vividly reflected his journey, pieces that depicted the intertwining dance of light and shadow, symbolizing his acceptance of both the darkness and the light within himself. Critics began to take notice. What started as disjointed fragments of despair blossomed into profound expressions of human experience. Galleries invited him to exhibit his work, and collectors sought pieces that spoke not just to aesthetics, but to the raw emotion embedded in each canvas. Viewers found themselves captivated by the way his art encapsulated feelings they had feared confronting: loss, regret, and finally hope. Alex organized his first solo exhibition titled Embracing Shadows, where each piece represented a chapter of his transformation. The night was electric with anticipation and nervous energy as friends, family, and admirers gathered around his art. During the opening reception, he marveled at how people were drawn to the same shadows that had once isolated him. They stood before pieces depicting darker themes yet found solace in their beauty. They shared their own stories of struggle and healing, turning the gallery into a space of connection and understanding. For Alex, this moment solidified a profound truth. Embracing fear could lead to liberation. He realized that all those who approached his art resonated with their struggles. Through sharing their voices, they created a community united by their vulnerabilities. As conversations flowed around him, Alex felt a sense of belonging he had longed for, a far cry from the isolation that once consumed him. With renewed purpose ignited within him, Alex embraced this new chapter filled with possibility. He recognized that while trauma may cast long shadows, it also illuminated pathways towards strength and creativity when acknowledged and accepted. With every creation, he was no longer just an observer of life, but an active participant in crafting a narrative rich with complexity and hope, a testament to the beauty found when one dares to connect with both light and darkness.